Since World War I, Britain's international influence has shrunk in favour of an ever-growing America that gave grounds in its trade policy for an ever-growing China. Once admired for its unionism in the Federalist Papers, Britain internally questions its destiny as an island, let alone as an international player. Yet at two poles of the world in regards to two great rivals, Britain's crown holds natural resources and wealth that is strategically necessary. Canada's wealth is diverted to America and Australia's to China. While it is true that Britain is just an island, its people are a continent spanning hundreds of millions across the globe in its settler colonies, including its lost republican experiment. The Crown has the East, it has the West. A further union with Britain in the Anglosphere forms a supermajority in opinion across Britain and her Crown nations. Why should America be our natural ally? They administered the collapse of our international interests. The American-British relation has not at all been reciprocal, and the alignment of our foreign policy with theirs now serves to our detriment, nostalgia aside. Britain has the people the opportunity to once again establish a bloc, a power, the Anglosphere. The timing is critical. This can only be done if its sovereign parliament acts and if it realises that one pragmatically binding law is the cession of its own territories as history has shown, even if it is legally possible for Parliament to reclaim jurisdiction with null effect. This should be in future the one and only check on our parliamentary sovereignty, perhaps through the Crown to preserve territorial integrity. Chapter 1. The Repatriation of British Nationals Across the Globe. It seems for many nations, like say South Korea or Armenia, with varying implementations, that it is sensible and fair for its diaspora to be offered the privilege of citizenship to their homeland. I add that not all may take this option. Some may have dual citizenship at little cost to their home nation and continue to live happy in their new adopted home. The degrees of how far family can go back also differs for these nations. This paper advocates for all with British and Irish ancestry by at least 50% to be offered to pledge an oath to the Crown to gain citizenship of the United Kingdom. This is an opportunity Britain should seize. It even has millions of dispossessed in the United States who may have originally formed a host demographic of that country but no longer. Britain is their home, it is their lineage, and we should have a duty to respect that. The political implications of repatriation are also grand. It is foreseeable that many dual British national citizens, say in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, even the United States of America, will vote with Britain in mind, even so much as to sway its politics to Britain's interests. These citizens will be key loyalists in the push not just for trade or free movement, but federal union of her Crown nations. The cost of British repatriation. In the case of other diasporas that claim citizenship based off of heritage, many more of these citizens are net contributors to the state's treasury rather than takers. To address concern further, there is no reason as to why there can't be very basic residency conditions as to which services can be accessed in Britain or not by these new citizens. This is already an arrangement for many services in regards to citizens who are long-term residents elsewhere. Also, have we not a duty to help the British poor of, say, Appalachia? Englishmen on the hills of America are still Englishmen. The demographic concerns with the other professionals we may need may also be stumped simply by Anglo-Celtic free movement, not using, say, anti-Islam sentiment as a rationalization for the very real concern of a lack of cultural sovereignty. As for those concerned with the racial implications, a half Polish, half British person is as British as a half Nigerian and half British one. It's not a question of black and white, though it's true indigenous British are white. We are under no obligation to peoples who wish our rule gone and do not form our demographic. Chapter 2. A pragmatic amendment to parliamentary sovereignty. Many may know of Dicey's description of parliamentary sovereignty. No past parliament may bind a future one. This isn't so much a rule, but a description of reality. A future parliament can repeal impliedly or explicitly the acts of a previous one. As this is a discussion of union, There is one issue I have with this doctrine, that being that any parliament may cede the territory that it's sovereign over. Yet this poses a paradox. If a parliament cedes sovereign territory, hasn't it effectively bound itself? Not legally, an act reasserting its claim may be made thereafter. But I'd like to pose an example of this problem. Suppose Parliament cedes all territory to secessionists or foreign states for every part of the sovereign country except the ground it stands on. Now technically, this wouldn't be legally binding, as it could thereafter make an act, like mentioned before, claiming the sovereignty it once held. However, anyone with any sense can tell this act is in fact pragmatically binding to the future legislatures, as it would lack the scale of enforcement required to enable an act to enter into force. As such, if Parliament ceding territories is in fact binding on future parliaments, then for sake of union, that should be one check the monarch should hold veto over, for the interest of the crown and country. The incentive would be only growth in sovereign territory, only new possibilities, rather than diminishing influence. The Crown should give assent to any act but the cession of its territory. The constitutional aspects of this I will discuss another time, as I'm not quite sure of the arrangement of myself. I am hopeful that our next king may be on board with such a task. Chapter 3. Our Historic Ills. What we can learn from Britain's time in Africa, India, America, and even Hong Kong is the simple fact the exploitation of other demographics is not viable for our long-term interest. The case study of Hong Kong proves that demographics are destiny. Hong Kong was once a rock with no permanent settlement, unlike even Gibraltar. As the population grew, specifically the Chinese population, they were segregated from white institutions, and then those institutions became less legitimate in a popular manner, and eventual rule by a minority of under 1% of the total population. In times of mainland flux, millions of Chinese entered Hong Kong. Were they entering to contribute to the British project? No. They entered from a personal desperation, and many brought their politics with them. Followed such events as the Double Ten riots, which saw mainland immigrants, nationalist or communist, in brawls on the streets and housed at the cost of the British administration. It's a myth that the core of Hong Kong was under some binding lease. It was the same as Gibraltar. The island, it was ceded to Britain in perpetuity, along with parts of Kowloon. This is why, in retrospect, I first challenged why on earth the UK would give away such financial leverage to communist China. It was under no obligation to. Margaret Thatcher didn't seem like too much of an iron lady when it came to the relatively soft leader of China, Deng Xiaoping. Though now I understand why Thatcher put up much more of a fuss over an island of sheep near Argentina. It wasn't because of a water infrastructure or military threat. It's because they were British sheep. Likewise, in Gibraltar, they were very patriotically British subjects. Whether the white supremacy of early Hong Kong, the lack of Chinese integration and representation caused this or not, is besides the point. Hong Kong made no fuss in 1997. They were Chinese, not British. Yet now they hold up British flags and pro-democracy protests, despite the place never being a democracy. Quite frankly, even if it were just for free speech, it is a wrong commotion at the wrong time. It is true our history is plagued with many moral ills. Though I may add, many criticisms of such ills are made with our own conceptions. Many don't even say have a problem with slavery if it were in a more aboriginal, dispersed and culturally differentiated form. But specifically, they only take issue with slavery of a European character, involving property rights and markets. For me, slavery is a wrong full stop. And if anything, the fact we did it best was the clearest and most brutal description of why that is. That being said, I will never feel guilty that we did it best, because I don't view myself as any more morally culpable in any tribal sense as any other group on earth. In fact, this guilt, despite our empire being an introspective one, has led to our withdrawal of power, a lack of pride of who we were and what we are. Anyone who is British should consider themselves lucky and grateful, for we are a people with great achievement, and if we don't exercise our power, it doesn't disappear, It is only exercised by others against our interest. Chapter 4. Our Island and Celtic Myths. It may be noted that the Provisional IRA chose not to bomb Scotland due to them being Celtic brothers. Instead, they chose to bomb perhaps one of the most Irish places on earth at the time, a place called London. Such is the irony of Pan-Celtic thinking. England undoubtedly committed many wrongs in Ireland, and due to its absolute advantage in population size made up most of the response to, say, the Irish War of Independence. So is England evil due to its population advantage? Well, Scotland, when looked in terms of its population size, disproportionately sent far more black and tans, and contributed to empire far more prominently than England. In fact, the union of our two petty kingdoms was initiated and crowned by Scotland, and then in Parliament by both sides of the upper echelon, for Scotland's colonial venture, the Darien scheme, in Panama had landed them in financial disaster. Yet I am told to believe in some Braveheart fashion that Scotland is some poor chained victim of union with England. What about Thatcher? Well, what about the northeast of England? And that's without a West Lothian problem, and with lesser weighting per head in elections. Wales voted for Brexit, Scotland not. And most bizarre of all, now Cornwall has a magical made-up black and yellow tartan that has never been worn in all of history until the last century. There is an obsession with being indigenous, as if the English aren't, despite still mostly being Britons in makeup, and despite even the fact the Anglo-Saxons arrived far before the Maori arrived in New Zealand. I'm a bit Devonian myself, and I even enjoy a Devon pasty. Banter aside, there is an Anglo-Celtic people, and there is an Anglo-Celtic interest. Conclusion. My aim is to deconstruct the shame, the lies, the myths, the pessimism that haunts over us as a nation, and to say that it's not impossible. The opportunity is there, we just have to take it, and when we do, never again let it slip away from us. God save the King.